But Brandon, we are going to move on into the Utah Utes. Not one Utes, but two Utes. I make that joke every year. My cousin Vinny joke that I make every single year when we do this preview. Not one, but two Utes.
You do.
I do. I love my cousin Vinny. I love making that joke, especially with the two Utes. Two Utes. Not youths. It's Utes that he says in the movie. But we're going to be talking about the Utah Utes. And yet again, guys, are we feeling okay? It might be a little hot in here. We might be a little feverish. Because we're talking defense again to start a preview. And we're going to look at Utah's defense. This is a defense that last year, number 1 in the Pac-12 in rushing defense, and they were tied for 8th in the country with 43 sacks. Brandon, I'm just going to ask you plain and simple. Does this team this year, with the losses they experience, do they not get back to that, but do they kind of regain those numbers this year, or will we see a little step back from the defense in 2017?
I don't know, Ricky. I think that you lose 28.5 of those 43 sacks. Mm-hmm. The guys you had there to do that, they're now gone. And that's going to be tough to replace. That's going to be really tough to replace. The secondary loses a lot. This is a team that usually is looked at as being a team that is very good defensively. And I am certainly not saying that they won't be good defensively, but will they be 48th in defense last year good defensively? I'm not sure about that. I think that their linebacking core will be fine. They're going to move to a 4-2-5 alignment, which should be good against good ground games, which will be helpful. But will they be able to replace all the guys that they lost and be able to come back with the same production that they had last year? That's going to be tough. That's going to be tough to do. And not saying that they can't repeat it, but they're going to have a lot of guys step up right away to be able to do that. And will that be the case with Utah? They always seem to produce pretty good defensive players and have a pretty strong, solid defense. I think that they'll be around the same spot as last year, but they may not be quite up to par where they were last season. That's what I'll say.
And to me, those sack numbers are crucial because, like you said, 28 sacks they lose?
20.5.
They lose from last year. And the reason why I look at those is because of when you look at back, kind of like what we talked about with Arizona State a moment ago, when you look at this team, they're going to be in the midst of, we're in Chicago, we like to use a different word for this, but they're going to be in a complete rebuild when it comes to the secondary. It's not going to be a retool like we're used to here in Chicago. It is going to be a rebuild with their secondary. And the reason why those 28.5 sacks kind of jump out to me is because if this team is unable to get back to that production of getting after quarterbacks, that means quarterbacks are going to be up for longer. That means they are going to have more time to exploit your secondary, which of all the defensive units in this entire unit, they, coming into the season, look like they are most likely going to be the weakest coming into 2017. So the sack numbers need to be replaced by somebody. Somebody needs to step up into those roles, get after the quarterback. If they can get anywhere near to the 40-some that they had a year ago, then that might be able to mask the kind of weakness that they will have in the secondary, as the only guy, the exception to the secondary that they're bringing back is Chase Hansen. He's it. He's the safety. He was a quarterback but became a defensive star with Utah. Really, it's him. He's the only one in the secondary. Other than that, the entire unit is kind of, I don't want to say they're in shambles, but you're rebuilding this unit for a reason because there is nothing there around him. So that's why I look at those sack numbers and they have to get back to it. And it's more important because from what head coach Whittingham has said, he said, and I'll just say the quote, "We're not going to apologize for winning 9+ games the last 3 years, but we want to win a championship. We've got to find a way to break through, end quote. And I know this kind of speaks into a greater kind of more so than just the defense, but I feel like if you can't get those sack numbers to where they were and people exploit your secondary, you're not going to be able to break through, and you're not going to be able to get to a championship, whether that be Pac-12 or college football.
No, I completely agree with you, and I think that that's where we have to then kind of bounce it over to the offensive side of things and, talk a little bit about what they're going to be able to do there. They lose running back Joe Williams. They lose him. Zach Moss is going to be the guy most likely to lead the running back unit, and then Troy Williams, the junior, will be the guy at quarterback, and he's been pretty consistent, but he needs to be a little bit more consistent. Like last year, one of the games, and it was against Oregon State, I think he goes 4 of 13 passing. I mean, a game like that, you just can't have that. That's not going to do you a bit of good. I think being more consistent and coming to play with some solid numbers each and every game, that's what you need to be able to bring to your team.
And the thing that I look at offensively, like you bring up Williams, I look at another guy, 2 Troys on one team. Talk about 2 Utes. We're talking about 2 Troys here as his coach, offensive coordinator coming in, Troy Taylor, the 8th play caller in 9 seasons for Utah. 9 seasons, you've had 8 different play callers. So he's going to have he hasn't been there all 8 years, but another new play caller, one that he didn't have last year. And the thing that I think Troy Williams is going to help this team with, and this kind of leads to that quote from Whittingham, is they need to keep the consistency going. Because one of the big games that they're going to have, and I'm only putting a focus on this one, is October 14th. They're going to go to USC. Williams, to me, is going to be key, not just this season, but in that game, because not only have they won over USC before, they've beaten them twice in the past 3 seasons. And there's no way you can talk championship, whether it's in the Pac-12, whether it's in college football, whether it's national, whether it's conference. You can't talk about that and lose to USC because of what we talked about in the UCLA one of they're going to be coming back. So really, I look at this conference and Utah kind of begins it. UCLA begun it. This is kind of continuing the conversation. We might be in a 4-team race because it could be the 2 California teams, Colorado and Utah, that are all vying for a possible Pac-12 South Division championship. In the end, though, the real question comes down to who's going to challenge the California teams. Is it going to be Utah or is it going to be Colorado? And for Utah, it starts with Troy Williams. He's the one that has to make it to where, yes, they can challenge UCLA and USC.
And I think that a great point to bring up is the fact that he was so good in the win against USC last year. And in that win, I mean, it goes to show he's got the leadership, the toughness, the skill, the ability, the mobility, like all those things he showed in that game and he has shown. But then as I go back to, he completes 4 of 13 passes against Oregon State. Oregon State, okay? That's not good. Things like that cannot happen.
So consistency needs to be there.
But you just beat USC. You can't then lose to a team that you were supposed to beat.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people say you have to beat USC. No, if you beat them, that's great. That's plus. But if you lose to Oregon State, that is not good. That was not supposed to happen. That's a loss that was not supposed to be on your schedule. And I think that you need to win the games you're supposed to win.
That's exactly it.
And you have to be competitive and maybe get a win in a game that maybe you weren't supposed to win. That's when you end up having a good season.
Well, and it kind of brings me to how many times with us, we've, in our past, in college and post-college, we've called basketball, collegiate basketball and football games together. And how many times did me and you talking, or we're talking to the coach after the game and they say, well, this was a game we just played up to our opponent. Played up to the opponent, got the win. Or, and this is the most cases that we've had to deal with, is, Coach, why was this game so hard? We just played down to our opponent today. We really played down. We should have played better than what we did. And you can't have that if you're Utah, because with Utah, they're not going to be a team like, and people are going to get upset that I keep bringing them up, but they are the staple for this example. Utah's not Alabama. They're not a team where you could walk into a schedule and go, yes, win every game. I could see a win in every single game for this team. They're not a team that they walk into the building and they are the favorite to win that game just because they're the Utah Utes. They're a team where some games they're going to be the underdog, some games they are going to be the favorite in that game. And if you are the favorite, Oregon State, for example, don't play down to your opponent. Don't play down, play to where you are at. However, if you're going up against, like last year, they went up against guys like number 9 Colorado, number 4 Washington. They went in, or they played against USC. That one was at home. Play up to those opponents. Play up, put a little oomph, a little gusto into those games to try to get those wins, because that is going to make you a successful team moving forward. And I look at their schedule this year. Very similar to the ones that we've looked at already. Of course, they're going to have all the same South opponents, but the thing I find interesting is they have on the docket Washington. They're a team where it's like, oh, they don't have Washington on there. Some South teams, yes, you do. They are in the boat of a UCLA again. Not only do you have to play USC and UCLA this year, which UCLA should be better with a healthy Josh Rosen, you also end the year at Washington and then at home against Colorado, two teams that you did not beat a year ago.
A really interesting thing when you're talking about the schedule is the fact that the Utes don't play Oregon State this year, and they don't play Cal, and they get the 4 best teams. They have Stanford and Washington State, who will come and play in Salt Lake City, but then they go to Oregon, they go to Washington, and they go to USC. They've got a tough schedule. I mean, there's no getting around that. They have a very, very difficult schedule. They'll start the season most likely 4-0, but then you get to Stanford. Stanford comes to you, and then it's right on to USC, Arizona State. I think a team you'll beat. Oregon on the road, a team that I'm not sure yet about Oregon.
I'm
not sure yet about Oregon because of the fact that they are a team that the last couple of years, ever since they were in the championship game, they've been one of those teams that's kind of been there, not so much, fallen off the radar.
You know the saying where they usually say this isn't your granddad's, and then they put the team in there, basically saying this isn't the team you saw a long time ago. The thing I'm going to say for Oregon this year is this is not your older brother's Oregon team, because it's not far enough to be your granddad's team, but this isn't the Oregon team that was like Chip Kelly.
I was going to say this isn't your Chip Kelly Oregon football team. That's exactly what it is. It's not Chip Kelly who has this high flying offense team. Just everything's working for him. That's not Oregon. Not to say that Oregon won't be a tough opponent, but that's just not Oregon right now. UCLA is going to be very difficult. Washington State, not sure yet if they're going to come back again and be a team that is one to be reckoned with. Washington most likely will be good again, and Colorado, I think, falls off from where they were last year.
Colorado's the iffy one, because I think when we say fall off, I don't think they're going to fall off the wagon completely. When I say fall off, they're not going to win the division, but they could be the 4th best team in this division. And some people might say, well, Ricky, to me, that's falling off the wagon. No, if you're one of the top 4 teams in this division, you have not completely fallen off the wagon. However, if Utah doesn't play well, especially coming off of a potential loss to Washington, how will they play in that last game? The deck is stacked against Utah, I will say that. The secondary issues that we have planned out, yes, they have a quarterback that they can call their own, but yet again, a new play caller comes into the offensive fold, and they have the one of the toughest schedules when it comes to the Pac-12. Like you said, 4 best teams: Stanford, Washington, Colorado, UCLA, and USC coming into this year. I said 4, I meant 5. Coming into this season of potential games, I look at the schedule, and at the best, maybe I see, unless you steal one of those 5 games, at best, 5 or 6 wins. And to me, the question is the Oregon-Washington State opponents. How do you do against those two? That's the big question for me, are those games, because otherwise I see this team going 4-0, losing 2, winning 2, lose, win, lose, lose. So 6 wins at the most, that's what I see, and that would not be a successful season for a team that Whittingham has said we're not going to apologize for winning 9 games in the last 3 seasons where they're used to. Before we move on, any last thoughts you have for the Utah Utes?
My final comment is that success for Utah would be another 9-win season, something that they could do. I mean, I've already looked at, 6 wins for sure I think they should get. And then, they played USC tough last year. They beat them last year. Will they be able to do the same thing again this year? If they can do that and they can beat USC, that's going to set a tone for the rest of their season when they have Oregon and UCLA, Washington State, and Washington to follow that. So that'll be a great tone setter if they're able to do that. If they don't get the win there, that's going to be pretty tough to be able to try and stay in the top, towards the top with the rest of the guys. Not that they won't, but you certainly won't be the number 1 or the number 2 team then.
Well, and this is where I want to throw it on to you guys. Let us know what you think down below about the Utah Utes. Is the secondary that big of a concern? Are they going to make up for the loss in sack numbers that they lose from players leaving the team from last year? And also about the schedule. How many wins do you see? What's a successful win for Utah? Let us know down below in the comment section.